The 19th century encompasses both Romantic and Victorian styles of literary initiations. You must be having a basic idea on the social, political, and literary history of the 19th century, but let's have a glance at what it is. And for our convenience, we divide the periods according to the rulers and their period of reign. Okay, so from 1837, the Victorian period begins with Queen Victoria and ends in 1901. So the period before 1837 is usually referred to as the Romantic Revival, Romantic Movement, Romantic Era, or whatever it is. In this paper, 19th century British literature, there are some literary pieces for you to study belonging to this Romantic and Victorian styles. So coming to this Romantic period, Romanticism. What is Romanticism? Romanticism is a style in the fine arts and literature that emphasizes passion over reason, imagination and intuition over logic, and complete expression of the emotions and spontaneous action over restraint and order. This is what we usually say. So definitely with this definition, we know that Romanticism contrasts with Classicism. Okay, it's a total contradiction to Classicism. Then though romantic tendencies or the temperament is already found throughout the literary history, the romantic movement refers to the period from the late 18th century to the mid 19th century. Already we know that there are medieval writings and Shakespeare's writings. So many literary works were showing the temperament of this romantic elements or this romantic temperament. But still, we consider this particular period as the period of romantic revival. That's why it is called the romantic revival. The 18th century in both England and Germany saw a strong reaction against this rationalistic canons of French classicism. So this reaction brought to the light this romantic material that had survived from medieval times, and that's why it is called the romantic revival. And usually we used to say that there are so many shifts happen during this romantic period, because we know that the period just before romantic revival was the neoclassic period. So neoclassic period and romantic period are totally opposite to each other. There happened a lot of shifts. So which are these common shifts? You must be knowing, but still let me say. Of course, it is a shift from faith in reason to faith in senses, feelings, and imaginations. When the neoclassical period was given emphasis to reason, romantic period entertains the senses, feelings, and imagination. And of course, the neoclassical period was giving interest in urban society, which has shifted to the rural or natural life. Then public or impersonal poetry was given importance during the neoclassical period. All those coffee house culture and this sophisticated form and content, we know all those things. But in romantic period, you can see the subjective poetry was celebrated. Now, concern with the scientific and mundane was a feature of this neoclassical period, and the interest in mysterious and infinite is the temperament of the romantic period. So these are the major shifts. Not only this, there are many, but these are the major shifts happened when it is shifted from neoclassical to the romantic period. It was a revolt against the literary conventions, of course. To substantiate this particular point, I must quote John Keats. John Keats, in one of his letters to John Taylor, Keats was saying, "If poetry comes not as naturally as the leaves to a tree, it had better not come at all." This is what John Keats said. So, of course, it relates with Wordsworth's definition that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. Then romantic ideas propose freedom and revolution. Of course, there happened a number of revolutions during this period, and all the major romantics were influenced by these revolutions. So the major idea proposed by these writers are freedom and revolution. And of course, freedom of the common man, then importance to strong, original and authentic feeling rather than this artificial initiations. Then natural language was given importance. Then of course, individualism was one of the important features of this romantic period. Poet itself is presented as a prophet, seer, or a legislator. And the social responsibility of the poet is much emphasized during this period. Then, of course, just like the poet, there emerged the concept of a romantic hero. Who is a romantic hero? A solitary dreamer, even an outlaw who turns away from the society, or one who is plagued by the guilt and remorse. So, such a person is called the romantic hero. Okay, he was in revolt against the social conventions. Of course, Byronic hero is an example for this romantic hero. Sorry. Then subjectivity and introspection was another ideas proposed by the romantics. Then sublime beauty of nature, the lure and the exotic orient, and there are many. These are the major points, and of course you have to extend and expand all these points. I'm just mentioning the points here because I told you I have the limitation of time and all. So you must be knowing that we have big six male poets during this romantic period. William Blake, William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Lord Byron, P.B. Shelley, and John Keats. These are the big six male poets who were so popular during the romantic period. And of course, we had some female romantics too. I don't know how many of you are aware of the female romantics. But of course, there are many called Mary Shelley is there, Charlotte Turner Smith is there, Mary Robinson, Hannah More, Alice Trickey, Joanna Bailey. So many such authors are there, poets are there. While the male writers concerned with nature rather than society, looking beyond the material world to something transcendent, and they were introspective in nature, while the male poets were dealing with all these ideas, the feminine romanticism celebrated the domestic effects, family and social bonds, etc. Okay, this is just a hint on this area, and we'll be definitely elaborating all these points when we are taking the contents in detail. Okay, definitely we'll give you a detailed idea of all these points. Then literature of the Romantic period. Coming to the literature of the Romantic period, it is considered one of the most fertile periods in the case of literature. Okay, there was poetry, novels, essays, and of course criticism. All these genres were common during the Romantic period, and a great range of subjects too. It didn't limited into specific subjects, because the classical themes were there. Classical themes were celebrated by John Keats and Shelley. They borrowed the classical themes and incorporated in their works. And some adopted the Middle Ages themes of Middle Ages. And Walter Scott, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Sate, etc. are some of the writers who tend to have this Middle Ages themes. And some depicted the modern times. Of course, the novelists of this period, they depicted the modern times, and almost all the romantics depicted nature. Of course, you know that nature is an inevitable part of the romantic period, and almost all the romantics depicted or celebrated the theme of or the notion of nature. Apart from this, periodical writing was also popular during this period. You know, so many initiations like the Examiner, Edinburgh Review, Quarterly Review, Blackwood's Magazine, all these were popular during this period. And reforms in politics and education were done during this period. All these are the hints you have to expand. Okay, then romanticism is found not only in literature but in paintings, music, art. Everywhere the romantic temperament is there, and England and Germany are the major countries who celebrated romanticism. Of course, it expanded to all over the world. And now coming to what led to this romantic revival from the neoclassical period, what led to or what gave a start to this romantic revival? Uh, of course, you must be saying that the publication of lyrical ballads, because that is the major idea which comes to our mind when we speak about this romantic revival or romantic period. But along with the publication of lyrical ballads, there are so many other factors which contributed to the emergence of this romantic revival. So they are like, first of all, maybe we can see the discovery of Shakespeare or the influence of Shakespeare. Following the Licensing Act of 1737, you know, Shakespeare was a romantic in temperament. When you analyze the works of Shakespeare, you can see the romantic temperaments, the multiple plots he included in his works, and the natural descriptions he tend to give. All these prove the romantic temperament of Shakespeare. So Shakespeare was a major influence on the romantic writers. Then of course the revival of folk traditions. Okay, this fairy tale and folklore themes appeared in painting, literature and music. All these things influenced the romantics. Then after that, Orientalism in literature and art. This is also one of the influence for the romantic revival. The Oriental tales like Johnson's Rasselas, Goldsmith's The Citizen of the World. So all these works influenced, of course. Then, of course, the translations from Sanskrit made by the Indologist William Jones. You must be knowing the first Sanskrit play to be translated into English. Which is it? Yes, Abhijnana Shakuntalam in 1789. So all this Orientalism in literature and art, this is also a major point which influenced the Romantics. Then after that, you can see the biblical or mythical and mystical literature. This was also an influence on the Romantics. Of course, William Blake's apocalyptic poetry is an example for this biblical influence and all. Then influence of Rousseau. Influence of Rousseau is also very important because he explored in his fiction and agonies of frustrated love. In his fictions, you can see this agonies of frustrated love, and all those romantic elements were there in Rousseau. Then, of course, French Revolution. French Revolution is a major influence, and with its ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, that influenced the Romantics like anything, especially Wordsworth and all. Then you can see the macabre and Gothic elements in paintings, then Gothic romances, then Edmund Burke's this Sublimity of Terror. Then transitional poetry. Transitional poetry, of course, you must be knowing because you have already done Thomas Gray. So all those transitional poets and their poetic style influenced romantics like anything. And after that, of course, the publication of lyrical ballads in 1798 by William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And after 2 years in 1800, you know that the preface to lyrical ballads was published along with the second edition of lyrical ballads, in which Wordsworth has given the detailed description and explanation of what he meant by romantic writings and how it is different from the previous writing styles and what is the intention, etc. And you have already done it in your criticism paper, I hope. So there is no need of much explanations for this. So all these contribute to the romantic revival, and of course, this is a period of revolutions. Apart from the French Revolution, you can see revolutions in Corsica, which is an island in the Mediterranean Sea, and in Ireland, there happened a series of failed rebellions against England, and in Greece, there were revolutions against Turkey. So many such revolutions were happening during this time, and all these influenced almost all the romantics. And you have to go and analyze in detail how all these revolutions influenced each romantic writer. Okay, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, Shelley, all these people are influenced by these revolutions, and you must see it in detail. And you can have a detailed study on this. And after this, maybe let's see who are the major writers during this, apart from this major romantic poets, who are the major writers of this period. In poetry, you have Leigh Hunt, John Clare, and coming to the novelists, you have Sir Walter Scott, Jane Austen. In prose, there are Charles Lamb, Thomas De Quincey, William Hazlitt, etc. So all these people made their contributions to this particular period with this romantic temperament in their writings. And this is just a glance on how romantic period is. This is nothing but just an overall view.